farmers were very busy. There's always something to do on the farm. And then when you have another job on top of it, a part-time or full-time job, there's not that many extra hours in the day. But the way I would perhaps frame this is I'd ask farmers to consider one simple kind of mathematical equation. If you were to take your health out of the equation, so if you lost your health, what impact would that have on the farm? And then what impact would that losing your health have on the farming business? Then you could consider what impact would losing your health have on your family or the people around you. And finally, what impact would losing your health have on you? And I think if you honestly reflect on those questions, you'll realize that health and wellness has a huge part to play.
Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef Podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and in advance of the National Teagasc Beef Conference taking place on the 19th of November in the Landmark Hotel, Carrigan-Shannon, County Leitrim, I'm joined by life coach Shane Pearson with some key tips to stay resilient on the farm through stressful times. Shane, you're very welcome. You're from a farming background. Can you give an insight into your career to date?
When I left school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, but there was a busy family farm to go back to. So I went home and I joined my brother and my father on the farm and got stuck in there, and then spent the rest of the decade farming. I did my green cert in the local Teagasc office, and I managed to buy a bit of land. And then when I was around 28, I was a bit restless. I realized I was more of a people person maybe, and there was some other calling in me. And I started to pursue an interest I had in health and well-being, and particularly mindset. I was driven by this question of why do we not do the things we wish we did more of, and why do we continue to do the things that we wish we didn't do so much of? And that led me to train in something called neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP. That's really about mindset. It's working with the mind to make those changes that can be quite tricky. And then I spent about a decade going around the world training to the highest level in NLP. And then I got a lot of good results with clients, but I started to realize there was a limitation because we can't ignore the body. And that led me to an interest in nutrition and looking after the physical health. And then I decided to train in nutritional therapy, and I studied that for 4 years with a college called the Institute of Health Sciences. And while I was studying with them, they had a problem because they were training some great people with expertise in nutrition and had a lot of nutrition experts, but they were struggling with helping people make and maintain the dietary changes they were recommending. So they asked me, could I come on board and start to upskill their nutrition experts in things like mindset. So I started working for them, and then they found a training in a health and wellness coach, pioneer in America, who was training health and wellness coaches, and they invited him over to Ireland to deliver a training in health and wellness coaching. And I was part of that class, and I was probably one of the first trained health coaches in Ireland. And after that training, they decided this was a missing link. They wanted to bring in further nutrition experts, and they fast-tracked me to become their trainer. So I trained up to become a health and wellness coach trainer, started training health and wellness coaches, and then over the last decade or so, I've been both training health coaches and then working and building up my practice and working with people one-on-one. And in the meantime, I was started with full-time farming, and then it became more and more part-time as I built up my practice. And I still have my farm and do that part-time. And my main job now is health and wellness coaching and helping people make positive, lasting change.
A real diverse career to date, Shane. You focused a lot on health and wellness and nutrition over the past decade, and most farmers listening would say, they're very busy on farm, they're busy off farm, possibly working part-time, family life. What has all of this really got to do with me? What's your thoughts, Shane?
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? Because farmers are very busy. There's always something to do on the farm, and then when you have another job on top of it, a part-time or full-time job, there's not that many extra hours in the day. But the way I would perhaps frame this is I'd ask farmers to consider one simple kind of mathematical equation. If you were to take if you were to take your health out of the equation, so if you lost your health, what impact would that have on the farm? And then what impact would that losing your health have on the farming business? And then you could consider what impact would losing your health have on your family or the people around you. And finally, what impact would losing your health have on you? And I think if you honestly reflect on those questions, you'll realize that health and wellness has a huge part to play in farming. And, you know, I've been lucky to coach people from a diverse kind of big backgrounds, and we don't have a monopoly on stress. We don't have a monopoly on busyness. We all have to perhaps reconsider how we prioritize health if we want to if we wanted to I call it stack the deck in favor of health, because you can do everything you can that's right, and you could still perhaps have an unexpected health crisis. But if we do everything we can, or do what we can within our capacity, I call it stacking the deck. We're tilting things in favor of us staying healthy or staying well. And I think that will have a huge impact on your overall farm. We tend to take for granted our health. And the old saying, you don't know what you've got till it's gone, can be very true. So we don't want to wait until it's too late. It's very hard to come back from a severe health challenge. If you can get it in, if you can address it earlier, it's usually a really, really much preferred solution. And I suppose a little metaphor I like to use is that flashing light on the dashboard. And I've been guilty of this myself. I remember having a car and a little flash, the red light came up on the dashboard, and I kind of ignored it. And then it went away, and oh, great. And then it came back, and then two lights came back, but my car kept driving. So I was so busy at the time, I was farming, and I just chanced it. And eventually then I blew out the engine, to be honest. Now that vehicle, I could replace the engine, or could even replace the vehicle. But in terms of our health, we usually get little warning signs before the health gets really bad. So I would just learn from my mistake and don't ignore those warnings. Most of the time we get little symptoms, and we have a tendency as farmers to be too busy to perhaps go to the doctor or whatever. But I would really urge people to just pay attention to those. They're often like the little early signs that things are out of place or things aren't quite in balance, and they're the times to do something about it.
That's a great metaphor, Shane. Really, we see some of the studies from farmers' experience that there's high burnout rates, physical health issues related to stress, and other poor mental health issues. What resources or what actions can farmers take to help with these issues and to, as you say, prepare in advance?
Luckily, I think there's never been more resources out there. There's never been better resources out there. But I think there's a bigger question to be addressed here, really, is farmers' either openness or willingness to seek those resources. Because farmers are incredibly resourceful people. Farmers dealing with problems every day or every week, and those problems come and go. They're not very predictable. There's so many moving parts on a farm. You're dealing with live animals and lots of different moving pieces. And we're incredibly resourceful. When there's a problem on the farm, if you don't have enough fodder, farmers are great at getting on the phone or going up and Dundee and finding extra fodder somewhere. So farmers are incredibly resourceful, but I think we have to acknowledge that we're not always great at seeking the help or looking for those resources. So I would just maybe I'd be trying to hammer home the message that sometimes we have to break down some of those barriers that might be there that prevents people looking for those resources. And then I'd also want to mention some of the great resources that are out there. For example, now, the IFA are doing these great health checks in the marts, and my father wouldn't be a great man to go to the doctor unless things are, get bad. But he was in the mart there one day, and he'd gone out, and there was one of those health checks, and he went in and got his checkup, and thank God all was well. So there's things like that for the physical health. The IFA, they're great now. I think working with Cree, I think, quick heart health check, very convenient for farmers. It's built into the day. They don't have to make an appointment or go out. Teagasc have the sowing the seeds of support leaflet. Mental Health Ireland have a page on their website called the Farming Resilience page. And then the GP, if you're not sure, a GP is always a good place to go to and just ask and tell him what's up. And if he can't help you, he's usually a great person to tell you where to go next. As well as that, you have I think every there's great therapists and holistic practitioners around the country, and I know a lot of farmers and either their wives or sisters are kind of have trained in some of those more holistic areas, are qualified health coaches. And my father, my father, he's a great man. He says, "Oh well, keep talking anyway." And whenever you're looking for information, you don't know what to do, he gets me to get on the phone and you talk to someone and then keep talking, and you learn something from everyone. And it's so true, because if you're open and you're talking and you might talk to someone and they'll send you to someone else and you'll find the resources you need. But perhaps that bigger question is, are you willing and open to seek those resources? Because there's a stigmas and taboos. They're being broken down, but I think that perhaps still work to be done, that we think, seeking help is a sign of weakness. And I think it's more of a sign of courage these days and more a sign of wisdom to seek out help. Like when that little red light's going off, it's better to take action. And there's people out there who are well trained, well qualified, and able and willing to help. And when you find that help, it really is very supportive, and it can be a game changer.
Most definitely, Shane, a lot of resources there that you mentioned, and I'll include all of those that you mentioned there in the text with the podcast. You mentioned there earlier, farmers are frequently faced with stress, particularly with calving season, market issues, weather, different inspections. What can listeners do in advance to try reduce this stress at these critical times of the year?
Reducing stress is obviously a good way to go about things. However, stress is inevitable. I'm trying to avoid it or eliminate it. It's just not wise in my experience. So perhaps I kind of try and shift the focus to resilience. Stress by itself isn't actually harmful. What is harmful is if stress builds up and we don't know how, or we don't get rid of it. And it's like filling up. If it keeps filling up, if we keep filling up with stress and know where to go with it, that causes the pressure and then the chronic stress, and then things get harder. So being able to release that stress is very important. But in terms of resilience, I like to think of resilience like the shock absorbers. If lots of farmers out there that have a Jeep, if you've got good shock absorbers on your Jeep, you can kind of fly over rough ground, or you can hit a pothole or a bumpy road. And when you've got good shock absorbers, they can take the impact off a pothole or a bump in your stride. It doesn't really shake the whole Jeep, or doesn't knock you around the place. But if the shock absorbers aren't there, every bump is a big thing, and it can knock you around. So thinking of resilience like your shock absorbers, when you've got good shock absorbers, and in terms of stress, you're able to take the impact of stress more on your stride. It doesn't have as big an impact on you, and it doesn't affect you for so long after the stress. So when we build up resilience to stress, we can just tolerate or get through more stress, and we're more equipped to deal with the stresses of life. And how I like to, I have a framework called the 5 Ps, or the Resilience Roadmap. And for each one of these Ps, I'll explain the Ps in a minute, but for each one of these Ps, you can create very actionable, to take actions that will build resilience in different ways that are very tailored to you and your unique circumstances. So the 5 Ps that I use are presence, purpose, power, people, and preparation.
The 5 Ps of resilience that you mentioned there, Shane, can you talk through what you mean when you say farmers need to be present? What tips have you for them?
Yeah, so that's the presence. That's the first P in the 5 Ps. And perhaps an easier way to explain presence, what it is to explain what it isn't. So what it isn't is when we're not in the present moment, and when we're stressed, when we're dealing with challenges, it's quite common for us to get caught up in our heads, and we're either a lot of time we're stressing about, or we're worried or we're anxious about things that may or may not happen in the future. And I bet you, like me, Catherine, we've all done this. We've wasted a lot of energy stressing about or being worried about something that never actually happens. But so the mind can be anticipating things to go wrong and stressing and worrying about things in the future. And we can also be ruminating over something that's happened in the past and it's annoying us, or it's staying with us. Even though it's in the past, it's still annoying us in some way. It's still causing us stress. So when we're present, we're just present in the moment. And when we're present in the moment, we're dealing with right now. And also when we're just right here, right now, dealing with the present moment, we tend to be a lot more resourceful and resilient. And it's actually, I say it's simple, but not easy. It's easy to forget this, but pulling yourself back into the present moment is a lot easier than you might think. For example, my favorite way is just through the breath. Going back, I think we all learned when we're young, just take a deep breath. But if we bring our awareness back to our breath at any moment, the breath is always in the now. So, and perhaps you could do this with me, Catherine. Just bring your awareness to your breath. Just be aware of your inhale, and notice when you're breathing in, just notice your breath coming into the body in some way. Maybe you'll feel it in your belly or coming in through your nose. And on the exhale, you might notice it. Just exhale and just bring your awareness to the breath going in and out. And even if you do that for a few moments, you might notice that you're coming back into right now. And it tends to be calming, it tends to be kind of slow the thoughts down. Do you notice any difference as we did that, Catherine?
Most definitely, Shane. I think you've gone through a lot of the 5 things there. Preparation in a lot of cases is key. You've mentioned, prepare and be it for anything. You're not worrying about issues before they come up. What can farmers do in order to be prepared?
I always think of Roy Keane and his quote, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. And now this is easier said than done. And this doesn't come naturally to me, but there's huge advantages to be done by preparing in advance for those busier times. And the key to it is to do them when you're quiet. The temptation is whenever things are quiet is to kind of just relax a bit. But coming up to calving season or an inspection, we can usually, remember the old saying, a stitch in time saves 9. I say, look for those opportunities where you can just make things a bit easier for you when you get into those crunch times, when you get into those stressful periods. So things like I know annoyances used to be for me like a badly hung gate that's pulling and dragging, and when you're really in a rush, it would be an extra stressful. Or going to the workshop looking for a tool and not being able to find what you're looking for, and wasting half an hour when you can't afford to waste 5 minutes looking for something that should have been a small job. Or planning ahead in advance, or thinking back about last year, the last time you went through calving season, any of those kind of annoyances or irritations that cost you in the past, and what can you do in advance, prepare now to iron out some of those distractions or annoyances. And then going into those busy periods, farmers, we're great all rounders. We can do so many things, but we're not often as good as looking for help. They're looking for backup. See, is there anyone you could get to fill in for you or to help you do certain tasks on the farm, or have a backup plan, someone to call on when you need them, rather than wait until you really need it and then not having prepared for that. Things like that are all helpful. But I also like to say that, farmers, everybody I say to people, you're the expert in your own life, and every farmer will know their life and their farm better than anyone else. So they'll know this, but maybe that attitude of just getting ahead of things and taking time when things are quiet to prepare for those events, it'll make for a less stressful crunch time or a busy period and take some of that pressure off.
Thanks very much, Shane, and we're delighted to have you speaking at the National Beef Conference this year, taking place on the 19th of November in the Landmark Hotel, Carrigan-Shannon, and we look forward to hearing your talk and what you'll be discussing that night, Shane.
And thank you very much, Catherine.
Also on the night, we will hear from Dr. Peter Doyle. Peter will be going through the impact of red and white clover on animal performance in suckler calf to beef production systems. Dr. John Donlan, researcher in Teagasc Grange, will be outlining how to control pneumonia in suckler weanings, and Dr. Patrick Forrestal, Senior Research Officer in Johnstown Castle, will discuss some of the practical tips for nutrient management solutions on beef farms. For the second session on the night, Dr. Owen Ryan from the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine is going to discuss some of the risks for farmers in relation to blue tongue. Martina Harrington, Future Beef Programme Manager, is going to go through the innovations on the participants of the Future Beef Suckler Farms. There will also be a focus on the night in farmer health and well-being, and there will be a number of health professionals with information stands on the night. We look forward to seeing you all then. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan and thanks for listening.